I rescued my father's business, transforming it into a $150 million empire, while my Playboy brother. I saved my father's company, transforming it into a $150 million empire, while my carefree brother was still the favored one. He humiliated me and took the CEO role, firing me in the process. This story is titled My Irresponsible Brother. He spent years partying while I turned our father's struggling business into a $150 million empire, only for him to fire and humiliate me during a shareholders meeting. I left quietly. Hello everyone, before we begin, I have a small favor to ask. If you enjoy this type of content, please subscribe. It's free, helps the channel, and ensures you never miss out on great videos. Now, let's get started. Hey Reddit, have you ever had one of those moments when you feel like everything in your life is hanging by a thread? That was me 10 years ago, staring at a mess I hadn't created but couldn't ignore. Let me backtrack a little. My father built this corporation from the ground up. He was skilled at what he did, but when it came to finances, he struggled. By the time I was 26 and fresh out of business school, the company was losing money. My father, who was 10 years older than I was buried in stress. And then there was my older brother, Ryan, who was no help at all. At 31, while I was working hard to understand supply chains and financial models, he was, let's just say, enjoying life. He had a natural charm that made him the favorite, and that had always stung. One night, I found my father in his office, surrounded by mountains of unpaid invoices and contracts that would never be fulfilled. He didn't even notice me walk in. His desk looked like a disaster zone, and he appeared to have not slept in weeks. When he finally recognized me, he said, "I think it's over, son. I don't know how to fix this." Those words hit me harder than I expected. I wasn't sure if it was the weight of his words or the reality that everything he had worked for could collapse, but something inside me clicked. I promised him I would handle it. I'm not sure if he believed me at the time, but he didn't argue. Honestly, I think he was relieved that someone was stepping up. From that moment on, I practically lived at the office. I learned every detail about how the corporation operated, or rather, how it didn't. I became familiar with the numbers, renegotiated contracts, and spoke with every client that came through the door. Many of them didn't want to hear from me. I was young and inexperienced, and they had already lost faith in us. I can't tell you how many times I was met with rejection or had doors slammed in my face, but I kept showing up. People noticed that. Even those who didn't like me at first began to take me seriously over time. The first year was grueling. I worked at least 16 hours a day. My father was still officially in charge, but he delegated most of the decision-making authority to me. I drastically cut unnecessary spending, which included some of Ryan's extravagant expenses. He had a habit of charging personal costs to the company account, and no one ever stopped him. I put an end to that, and he didn't take it well. I remember him showing up at the office one day just to mock me. "Look at you, playing CEO," he said. "Don't get too comfortable, Dad won't let you take it." I ignored him, as I always did. I knew how the game worked. Ryan was the favorite, always getting credit for things he didn't do and the benefit of the doubt when he made mistakes. But I wasn't doing this for approval, I was doing it because I didn't want to waste my father's hard work. By the end of the year, things began to improve. We weren't thriving yet, but we also weren't sinking. Slowly, we started to rebuild our reputation. Clients returned, employees began to feel secure in their jobs, and the company was genuinely profitable. It wasn't much, but it was a start. However, success doesn't solve all problems. My father was proud of our progress, but in his eyes, Ryan could do no wrong. Ryan was always praised, no matter what I accomplished. Even though he was rarely around, my father would boast about his business acumen during family dinners, while everyone else talked about vacations. I was busy calculating numbers and strategizing for expansion. It wasn't fair, but life rarely is. I decided early on that I didn't need the credit. If Ryan wanted to accept all the accolades, that was fine by me. I had bigger goals in mind. My father's praise would have been nice, but what mattered to me was building the company into something sustainable, something I could look back on and say, yes, I did that. Over the years, the same as the weight of the betrayal I felt. My father, the man who had built this company from the ground up, had chosen my brother over me, and it stung more than I could express. I loved my father, but I couldn't shake the feeling that he had let me down in the most profound way. When my father finally stood up to deliver the big news, he loved to set the tone, building anticipation before revealing the truth. He adjusted his glasses and said, "It's time for me to pass the torch." He hesitated, gazing around the room as if expecting applause or some form of acknowledgement. After a moment of contemplation, he announced, "I have decided that Ryan will be the new CEO." Time seemed to freeze for a second. My brain struggled to process what I had just heard. Ryan? The CEO? Surely, this was a mistake. I glanced at Ryan, who was beaming from ear to ear. He wasn't surprised or taken aback, he was simply grinning. That's when it hit me, he had known all along. I didn't have time to dwell on it because Dad continued, "I believe Ryan embodies the leadership qualities this company needs to move forward." Leadership qualities? The guy who was often late for meetings and whose only contribution to the organization had been draining the entertainment fund? Before I could voice my disbelief, Ryan stood up, clutching a folder. "I'd like to take a moment to address something important," he said, his tone formal, which was amusing coming from him. He opened the folder and began flipping through the pages, making a show of it. "Over the past few months," he continued, "I've come across some troubling discrepancies in the way certain decisions have been made." He looked at me and then at the board members, as if gauging their reactions. "It appears that my brother has been operating outside his authority." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. He went on to accuse me of conducting unapproved deals, exceeding my authority, and compromising the company's reputation. He painted me as a reckless, power-hungry individual who had run amok while Dad was distracted. It was all cleverly worded, just vague enough to sound reasonable without providing any actual evidence. I opened my mouth to defend myself, but Dad interrupted me. "Let him finish," he said, his tone calm but firm. Ryan concluded his presentation by saying, "I only bring this up because I care deeply about the company's future, and I want to ensure we maintain the highest level of integrity." Integrity, coming from Ryan? The irony was almost unbearable. When he finished, the room fell silent. All eyes were on Dad, who took a deep breath and announced, "After reviewing the situation, I've decided to terminate Marcus's employment, effective immediately." My world came crashing down. Security guards appeared out of nowhere, standing by the entrance, seemingly waiting for the signal to escort me out. I didn't fight it, I didn't even say anything. What was there to say? The decision had been made long before the meeting, and I had walked right into their trap. As I gathered my belongings, Ryan leaned over and muttered just loud enough for me to hear, "Nothing personal, little brother, just business." That was when I realized it wasn't just about the company, it was about improving something to me, to Dad, and to anyone who had ever compared us. He wasn't concerned about the company's future, he was focused on taking it from me. I walked out of that boardroom with as much decorum as I could muster, but inside, I was seething. Not only had I been caught off guard, but Ryan had used years of hard work against me. He had not only taken the job but also the narrative. By the time I reached my car, my phone was flooded with texts from coworkers, friends, and even a few board members who were shocked by what had just happened. I ignored them all, I needed to think. The drive home was a blur as I replayed the encounter in my mind, trying to figure out why I had missed the signs. Looking back, they were all there, Ryan showing up at the office more frequently, Dad being unusually secretive, and even some of the board members acting distant. When I arrived home, I sat in the dark for hours, trying to make sense of everything. How could Dad, the man who had seen me devote my life to this enterprise, choose Ryan? Was it loyalty, blind favoritism, or was I just so easily replaceable in his eyes? Whatever the reason, one thing was clear, I was out, and Ryan was in. But here's the thing about Ryan, he was great at playing a role, but he was terrible at recognizing the stakes. While he was busy celebrating his victory, he didn't realize I wasn't leaving empty-handed. Far from it. I had spent years employees who had stood by me through the turmoil. We gathered in a small conference room, the atmosphere charged with a mix of excitement and uncertainty. I could see the determination in their eyes, they were ready to build something new, something better. I began the meeting by acknowledging the challenges we had all faced. "I know this has been a tumultuous time for everyone," I said, looking around the room. "But I want you to understand that this is an opportunity for us to create a company that values integrity, innovation, and teamwork. We have the chance to redefine our culture and our mission." The team nodded in agreement, and I could feel the energy shift. We discussed our vision for the new organization, focusing on how we could leverage our strengths and learn from the mistakes of the past. I emphasized the importance of transparency and collaboration, ensuring that everyone felt heard and valued. As we brainstormed ideas, I could see the spark of creativity igniting. We talked about new projects, potential clients, and innovative services we could offer. It was invigorating to witness the enthusiasm of my colleagues, who had once felt stifled under the previous regime. By the end of the meeting, we had laid the groundwork for our new company. We established a timeline for our launch and assigned roles and responsibilities. I felt a sense of purpose and direction that had been missing for far too long. Meanwhile, the fallout from Ryan's actions continued to unfold. The media frenzy surrounding his downfall was relentless. Articles painted him as the embodiment of nepotism, highlighting his reckless spending and unethical practices. The public was captivated by the story of a privileged son who had squandered his father's legacy. As the investigation progressed, more details emerged about Ryan's financial misconduct. It was revealed that he had been siphoning funds through forged vendor contracts and selling client information to competitors. The sheer scale of his deceit was staggering, and I couldn't help but feel a mix of anger and pity. He had squandered the opportunity to lead and had instead chosen a path of greed and betrayal. My father, once so proud of Ryan, was now faced with the harsh reality of his son's actions. I could only imagine the turmoil he was experiencing, grappling with the realization that the son he had favored for so long had become a liability. The board of directors was in disarray, scrambling to address the fallout and reassure investors. As the week progressed, I received numerous messages from former colleagues who had chosen to stay with the old company. They expressed their concerns about the future and their desire to join me in building something new. I welcomed them with open arms, knowing that their loyalty and experience would be invaluable as we moved forward. By the end of the week, I had assembled a strong leadership team, composed of individuals who shared my vision and values. We worked tirelessly to finalize our plans and prepare for the official launch of our new organization. On the day of the launch, I stood before a group of eager employees, ready to unveil our new identity. "Today marks a new beginning for all of us," I said, my voice steady and confident. "We are not just a company, we are a community. Together, we will build a culture of trust, respect, and innovation. We will learn from the past, but we will not be defined by it." The room erupted in applause, and I felt a surge of pride. This was what I had fought for, the chance to create a company that valued its people and its mission. As we moved forward, I remained vigilant, ensuring that we stayed true to our values and avoided the pitfalls that had led to the previous company's downfall. I knew that the road ahead would not be easy, but I was determined to lead with integrity and purpose. In the months that followed, we began to see the fruits of our labor. Our new organization gained traction, attracting clients who appreciated our commitment to quality and transparency. We developed innovative solutions that set us apart from the competition, and our reputation began to grow. Meanwhile, Ryan's legal troubles continued to mount. He faced multiple charges, and the media coverage showed no signs of slowing down. I couldn't help but feel a sense of vindication as I watched the consequences of his actions unfold. But my focus remained on the future. I had learned valuable lessons from the experience, and I was determined to ensure that our new company thrived. I surrounded myself with a team of dedicated individuals who shared my vision, and together, we built a culture of collaboration and respect. As the months turned into years, our organization flourished. We expanded our services, entered new markets, and established ourselves as a leader in the industry. I often reflected on the journey that had brought us to this point, grateful for the challenges that had shaped me into the leader I had become. In the end, it wasn't just about reclaiming my place in the company, it was about creating a legacy that would endure. As I watched them leave the office, the weight of the past hung heavily in the air. I had spent years trying to prove my worth, only to find myself in a position where I was now negotiating terms with the very people who had underestimated me. It was a bitter pill to swallow, but I was determined to move forward on my own terms. The next day, I finalized the paperwork for the acquisition of my parents' shares. It felt surreal to be in control of the situation, especially after everything that had transpired. I had built a new foundation for my career, and now I was ensuring that my family would not suffer the consequences of Ryan's actions. The relief on their faces when I presented the agreement was palpable, but I knew that this was just the beginning of a long road ahead. As the weeks passed, I focused on solidifying the new company's identity. We worked tirelessly to establish a culture that prioritized transparency, accountability, and innovation. I wanted to create an environment where employees felt valued and empowered to contribute their ideas. The team I had assembled was eager to make a difference, and together we began to see the fruits of our labor. Meanwhile, the fallout from Ryan's downfall continued to unfold. The media coverage was relentless, and the public was captivated by the story of a privileged son who had squandered his father's legacy. I couldn't help but feel a sense of vindication as I watched the consequences of his actions play out. The investigation into his financial misconduct revealed a web of deceit that had been carefully hidden for years. As the legal proceedings progressed, Ryan's reputation crumbled. He faced multiple charges, including fraud and embezzlement, and the evidence against him was overwhelming. I had no desire to gloat over his misfortune, but I couldn't deny the sense of justice that came with seeing him held accountable for his actions. In the midst of all this, I remained focused on my new company. I knew that the road ahead would not be easy, but I was determined to build something that would stand the test of time. I surrounded myself with a team of dedicated individuals who shared my vision, and together we worked to create a culture of collaboration and respect. As we continued to grow, I made it a priority to invest in our employees. I implemented training programs, mentorship opportunities, and initiatives that encouraged professional development. I wanted everyone to feel that they had a stake in the company's success, and I was committed to fostering an environment where innovation could thrive. By the end of the year, our hard work began to pay off. We secured new clients, expanded our services, and established ourselves as a leader in the industry. The transformation was remarkable, and I often reflected on the journey that had brought us to this point. Despite the challenges we faced, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. I had learned valuable lessons from the experience, and I was determined to ensure that our new company thrived. I knew that the past would always be a part of me, but I was ready to embrace the future. As the months turned into years, our organization flourished. We became known for our commitment to quality and integrity, and our reputation grew. I often thought about the lessons I had learned from my father and Ryan, and I was grateful for the opportunity to create a company that reflected my values. In the end, it wasn't just about reclaiming my place in the corporate world, it was about building a legacy that would endure. I had faced adversity and emerged stronger, and I was determined to ensure that my company would be a place where employees felt valued and empowered. As I looked around the office, I saw a team that was united in purpose and vision. We had come together to create something special, and I was proud of what we had accomplished. The journey had been long and challenging, but it had also been rewarding. I knew that we were just getting started, and I was excited to see where the future would take us. With each passing day, I felt more confident in my ability to lead. I had learned to trust my instincts and to surround myself with people who shared my vision. Together, we were building a company that would stand the test of time, and I was determined to ensure that it would be a place where everyone could thrive. As I sat in my office, reflecting on the journey that had brought me here, I felt a sense of peace. I had faced my demons and emerged victorious, and I was ready to embrace whatever challenges lay ahead. The future was bright, and I was excited to see what we could achieve together. When the door closed behind them, I sat back down and stared at the table for quite some time. This was hardly the victory I had expected. It did not feel like a victory at all. Instead, it felt like a necessary conclusion. Sometimes, doing the right thing doesn't feel pleasant, it simply feels like a satisfactory resolution. I didn't feel relieved or satisfied the day my parents signed the papers. Instead, I felt a peculiar sense of emptiness. It was finished. They had accepted the terms, and the money was on its way to them. I knew it was the right thing to do, but it didn't seem like a victory. If anything, it felt like I was finally bringing an end to something that had been broken for years. But life does not allow for introspection. While my parents adjusted to their new financial reality, I had a firm to run, one that, for the first time, was fully mine. The transition from the old company to my new venture went more smoothly than I had anticipated. Most of the personnel came over willingly, and the important clients stayed with us. It wasn't just about loyalty, they recognized the value of the relationships and systems we had established. If anything, the tumult surrounding Ryan's downfall had strengthened their faith in me. They realized who the true driving force behind the organization had been all along. One of the most significant adjustments I implemented was how we operated as a corporation. I had learned a lot from my blunders in the past, particularly regarding honesty and communication. Under the previous regime, decisions were frequently made behind closed doors, leaving people scrambling to adjust without a clear explanation. I wanted to do things differently. We began holding weekly all-hands meetings where I laid out everything: progress, challenges, and upcoming goals. No fluff, no business jargon, just plain talk about where we were and where we were going. The first few meetings were slightly awkward, people were unaccustomed to that kind of candor, and I could see some of them waiting for the other shoe to drop. But over time, they began to relax. They started to trust me when I claimed we were in this together. One of the most pleasant moments occurred about a month in when one of the senior developers approached me after a meeting. He had been with the company for years, one of the silent workhorses who got the job done without making a fuss. "Marcus," he began, "I just wanted to thank you. I've been here a long time, and this is the first time I've felt that someone truly cares about what we're doing." It took me off guard. I didn't know what to say, so I simply nodded and said, "That means a lot. Thank you for staying with us." Those brief moments reminded me why I was doing this. It wasn't about proving something to Ryan, my father, or anyone else. It was about creating something meaningful, something people would be happy to be a part of. By the conclusion of the first quarter, we had achieved not just stability but also growth. Revenue was increasing, client retention was at an all-time high, and we had even begun bringing in new business. The team was electrified, and the workplace was alive with a level of excitement I hadn't seen in years. One day, as I walked through the office, I overheard two employees conversing by the coffee machine. They didn't notice me, so I didn't interrupt. Honestly, one of them admitted, "This is the best thing that could have happened. The previous company was a complete mess. I feel like we have a future here." The other person nodded, "Yeah, Marcus gets it. He's not just sitting in his office barking orders, he's genuinely building something with us." Hearing that was more satisfying than receiving any award or accolade. It wasn't simply the numbers or the growth that mattered, it was the fact that people believed in our mission. Meanwhile, the old corporation was just scraping by. The lawsuits were stacking up, the stock was practically worthless, and the remaining employees were leaving as quickly as they could. Ryan, from what I heard, was attempting to avoid the spotlight, but the damage to his reputation had already been done. He was no longer a name people wanted to associate with. By 6 months in, the new company had established itself as the industry leader. We were not only surviving, we were innovating. We developed a new product line that improved logistics for small firms, and it grew faster than we expected. It felt like everything I had been working on for the past 10 years was finally coming together. For years, I had fought to prove myself to my father, Ryan, and everyone else who had ever doubted me. But in that moment, I knew I didn't have to prove anything anymore.